Good afternoon. I'm Rod Bomberger, moderator for this afternoon session, and we have. I know other people are running a little late, so we'll get started anyway. The first speaker today is a friend of mine. I'm from South Dakota, and Lyle is a fourth-generation rancher in Akaska, South Dakota. How about Lowry? Well, it's close to Akaska. I forget he took his horse to Akaska. Anyway, him and his wife Garnet have two children. Their daughter and her husband Chris live in Tennessee with four children, and their son Luke and wife Naomi are on the ranch with four children. The transition of managing the ranch began 15 years ago with their son Luke. And so they have done a lot of different conservation measures, and they always give their neighbors something to talk about. They also won the Leopold Award winner in 2014 and also the Environmental ESAP Award.
Well, thanks, Rod. I consider it an honor to always gather before my peers and try and explain some of the mistakes we've made along the way, and hopefully you can learn something from what we've done. And this is a picture of our ranch management team, our son Luke, his wife Naomi, and their four children. As grandparents, you like twins, and we are fortunate. We were blessed with two sets of twins. Luke and Naomi have three boys and a girl, Ella, Isaac, Noah, and Mike. And our hope is that at least one of them makes it back on the ranch. Our ranch is located in north central South Dakota, and from here it's a long ways, and there's no ocean close to us. We're about 12,000 acres. 10% is tillable ground and 90% is grass. We're about 18-inch moisture rainfall area. We can handle in the neighborhood of 1,200 animal units in an average year. Our ranch is made up of spring calving cows, yearling heifers, stockers, which are yearling steers, and then 3 years ago we added sheep to the operation. And as you see by the label, custom grazing, we don't own them, we graze for other people, actually just one entity. We also have the farming part of our operation, and we farm in a unique way. We farm with a checkbook. I don't know if anybody's ever farmed with a checkbook, but we do. And so what it amounts to is we pay half the expenses. The cooperator that has all the equipment and most of the labor provides half. And at the end of the year, we divide the proceeds. In the last 20 years, Garnet and I have been to Europe, specifically to Germany and Hungary 5 times. And one of the last times we were there, I spent good money going to botanical gardens, and what did I see but Leafy Spurge and wormwood sage. So they're two of the most noxious weeds that we've got on our ranch. But it's interesting over there, they're a botanical plant, and of course I knew that, but I was kind of surprised that I was foolish enough to spend money to go see them. But you know, if you go and you tour there, there's a word in Hungarian called nem jó, and which means no good. And so when I'd point at it and I'd say nem jó to my Hungarian friends, they would have no concept of what I'm talking about, because it's not a bad plant for them. So you start to thinking, well, if it's not a bad plant for them, why is it for us? What's happened? Why are deep-rooted perennials that are invasive something that we spend a lot of money on trying to get rid of? So the first thing we did is we tried to introduce flea beetles, and did not have very good results. They did okay, but we didn't get the kind of results we were hoping. The wormwood sage, no biological control that we could find except something like sheep or goats. We knew that could work. We have various types of thistles. Probably Canadian thistle is the one that we were most concerned about, and we were curious about what kind of results we could get on that. And then a plant that's not noxious, but that we've got a lot of, is western snowberry or buckbrush. And if you're in the type of soils that we've got in our part of the world, Western snowberry is a problem in places. So that was one of the things that we were trying to address. And this is our setup that we use, 100-gallon tank on a trailer that I built, pulled by side with boomless tips on it, and we can cover 30 foot at a time. And so we use that pretty extensively. Tordon and Milestone are our chemicals of choice. And like I said, it's got a hand wand on it, and that's what we use to control the areas where the infestation of any noxious weed is not too bad. So we in the past have thought about bringing sheep in, but you can see the kind of terrain we have from our ranch headquarters to the top of this hill, which is about 3/4 of a mile away, maybe a mile away. It's a ridge of hills. There's probably about 400-foot elevation change. So we've got quite a change of elevation on a ranch, and putting up the type of fence permanently that could contain sheep was never part of what we thought we'd be interested in. And then how do we water sheep? You know, we run herds of cattle, and those herds run from probably 300 head to 550 head. And so commingling, am I all right? I don't have my sound on, do I? Hey, there we go. Sorry about that. All right. Holler if there's something that's wrong. So anyway, the fencing I addressed, the water. So how do we water sheep and cattle? Because you've got both the issue of volume and then you've got access. You know, can the sheep reach into the tank? And then predators. In the winter, for example, the winter 2018, 2019, within a few miles of our ranch, including our ranch, they harvested 47 coyotes. So coyotes they're there, and we knew that they would be an issue. So how do we address the issue with coyotes, the issue of fencing, and the issue of water? This is what our typical fence looked like. 3 barbs, and does a fine job containing, you know, our cattle. Or single strand, high tensile fence that we energize, no problem with cattle. This is a typical perimeter fence that we've been building in the last few years on our ranch. And of course, that wouldn't hold sheep. So what we did was we did some research and of course talked to the man that provides the sheep. And what you're seeing here is a 3-strand polywire fence, and that's the typical fence that we build today. Sometimes we only use 2 polywires, but most of the time it's 3. The Peruvians that we have working for us, the H2A Peruvians, will say that you need 3 strands for the haired sheep because they're much crazy. And so it's something that's a little bit skittish, or a little, you know, goats they qualify for much crazy in their books. We've had guard dogs that are much crazy. So anyway, this is a typical fence that they'll build for them, a perimeter fence around the enclosure that they're in. If we have a perimeter that's got a barb, they'll just put up a single strand poly wire, as you can see at the bottom here, to contain the sheep. These are wooled sheep. They're a lot easier. So we have 1 band of wooled sheep and 1 band of haired sheep. So this is a typical watering source that we had on the ranch for cows. And you can see the cattle in the background here. This fence has been taken down. This is a watering pen that we had for the sheep. I know that we don't have sheep right here at this time because if the sheep were there, the cows wouldn't be there. The guard dogs we get are accustomed to sheep. They're not accustomed to cattle, horses, strange people, side-by-sides, porcupines, raccoons, coyotes, and they can pretty well deter anything from getting close to the sheep except a porcupine. And that's an interesting experience. Does everybody know what a porcupine is? All right, has anybody ever removed quills from a dog's mouth? Okay, well, when you can't capture the dog, you can't get close to the dog, it presents problems. But nothing that you can't overcome with a gun and a tranquilizer dart. So this is a tank that we added. The Uke tire tank that you saw works fine for the ewes, but if you have smaller ewes or you have lambs, what we've invested in, and we were starting to invest in anyway, it looks like a giant chicken water. It's made in western South Dakota. This is 12 inches high. It holds 2,300 gallons. It's got a skid steer plate on it, so if we want to move it, we can. We have two that are very portable. They hold 1,200 gallons, and those we move around quite a bit. These 2,300 gallon ones, for the most part, they pretty well stay where we put them. But at 12 inches tall, if you have a 40-pound lamb, they have no problem reaching in there. If you've got a calf that's 150 pounds, they have no problem reaching in there. And so they have really been a good addition to our ranch for watering. I also bought some steel pipe in South Dakota and elsewhere. We've had oil pipelines that either were abandoned or were repairing. And so we picked up some, this pipe here is between 20 and 23 feet long. The pieces are, they're 20 inches in diameter. They weigh 80 pounds per foot. I cut them in half and then sealed up the ends and made a watering trough. The water gravity feeds from this tank down into this one. I got a float down here. And it just gives us additional capacity for when we want to water the sheep. We've learned that sheep are a desert animal, and they're not like cattle. They don't need to water numerous times a day. So they water. I know this picture was taken between noon and 4 p.m. because that's when they come into water every day. You can see on the background, you can see a polywire fence. So this is a watering pen, and I would guess the watering pen is maybe 1 acre. And so there's going to be 1,000 ewes in here, and there's lambs in this band. So there's probably 2,500 head that we water in this particular spot. We'll put this out as, in particular, we put it out when there's lambs, just to give more capacity and ability for them to get around and drink. This is a typical watering pen. When they set up they'll use poly netting to water, or set up around the watering pan. And these troughs that you see here have salt in them, and you can see the blocks they put out, or they'll have mineral out here, and the salt blocks you can see setting there too. This is just an overview shot of processing. On this particular day, we were ultrasound testing. And I put this in there for one reason. This has all been set up for handling cattle. And we probably had to invest, I didn't invest anything actually. I found we had some used, we call them, they were hog panels is what they were. A combination of hog panels, 16 feet long. They probably weigh 40 pounds. And we had to put them across this gate and this gate across the bottom, and maybe one or two up here. But for the most part, our cattle handling facilities work just fine for handling the sheep. So in this, what they do is they'll bring them up here. We're ultrasounding the sheep, and they're coming out here and going back down and joining the band that they came from. When they ultrasound at our place, they can do about 150 to 170 an hour. And so anyway, that was a new experience for us, but you don't need a major investment if you've got cattle and you want to bring sheep into the operation. This is probably the biggest one investment we made is $1,500 I paid for this converted. It used to be an old conveyor, and it was converted over to a sheep loading chute. It's 32 feet long because the semis that come, they're triple decked with sheep, and the ability to get up that high is something we needed to invest in to do that. Now, you don't have to have one like this. You get some inserts that you could put in your cattle chutes to load sheep on a triple deck truck too. We do have, when we brought the sheep in to custom graze, what we got with the sheep are 2 Peruvians, 2 4-wheelers, 2 guard dogs, or excuse me, two herding dogs, and normally we'd get 4 guard dogs. This year, because it was a dry year and they couldn't take their sheep elsewhere, they wanted to get the dogs out of the yard, so they brought 8. And they won't bring 8 next year. They know that, and we know that, because we had problems. And the dogs, 2 of the dogs, we were unable to catch to even put them back in the truck to send them home. And so we'll have to deal with that. But so she talked this morning, one of the speakers did, about communication, and we get along pretty good. I will tell you that my experience talking to men in foreign countries is men's vocabulary need to be a lot less than women. You know, if you know the word for gun and cow and sheep and dog, you're probably pretty good. But we've learned a little bit of Spanish, and Google Translate has been something we use quite a bit. But if you ever do want to speak to somebody and use Google Translate, make sure you know which country they're from, because Spain is different than Peru, is different than Mexico, and so they like it in the translate set to Peru. So the other thing I did is I bought an old ice fishing shack and remodeled it. So we move this around to wherever they are. They don't really stay in it. They'll go out to check their sheep, and when they're out checking their sheep, then if the wind comes up, or if it's a real hot day and they want a place in the shade, or if it's raining and they've got additional tasks they need to do before they go back, it gives them a place to seek shelter. You can see the ranch headquarters are back here in the background. This is James and Alfredo and Jax and Remy. The other thing I built for them was a little cart, because we've got some sheep at times that need to be brought back to the ranch, and we've got a sick pen for them. And so anyway, they'll transport a lot of, sometimes it's a ewe that's had lambs. They're not supposed to come bred, but sometimes they do. And I talked a little bit about the guard dog issue. They're an absolute necessity. In 3 years, we've never lost one sheep to a predator. The minute the dogs are gone, the coyotes are back. The reason we know it is because, for example, this year I lost a calf shortly after the sheep were gone, and it didn't take but a day or two, and the calf was devoured, and that would have not happened with the dogs around. This is the kind of impact. This is the first year in 2019. That shepherd we had that year, Jesus, liked to use poly netting. So we did invest $2,000 actually in poly netting. The shepherds we have now said we don't need to put poly netting up. Poly wire is good enough. But Jesus used netting, and you can see how dense it was. And this is what it looked like. What we've learned is, they will consume the leafy spurge, but if it gets this thick, there's only so much they're going to eat. I mean, I like ice cream, but there's only so much of it I'm going to eat. And I will say that when you turn them in a paddock, and the paddocks are about 2 acres, and if you come back with 1,000 head in there, and you come back and say in 4 hours, the broadleaf plants, including the leafy spurge, are pretty defoliated. It's one of the first things that they'll go after. I've seen them already when they're trailing them, that they'll actually leave the bunch that they're moving with. If they see a leafy spurge plant, 50 feet away, they'll leave it. A couple of them will leave it and go over and eat it. What I want to show you here is a western snowberry. You can see they completely defoliate that. And the thing about western snowberry, it's a native shrub. We like to see it, but we don't like to see it as dense as it is, because if it gets dense, then what happens is the plant community that we've got is replaced by shade-tolerant plants, and that tends to be one in particular, and that's Kentucky bluegrass, because it does well in shade. And so we felt that the sheep have done a real good job in opening up the canopy and allowing more of our native species to return. This gives you a kind of a bird's eye view of how they graze, or how we set them up to graze. You can see the lines of the paddocks, and they just move down, and every day, so if they had this fenced on 4 sides one day, then the next day they leave this one intact and they built these 3. Then the next day they leave this one here intact and they build those 3. And so they build 3 sides every day. And these paddocks are in from 4 o'clock in the afternoon till noon the next morning. One of the things that, and this is Lolito and Jesus, they were there the first year in 2019. We were a little bit concerned because you can see up here a fair amount of impact. This probably was okay, but this right here we were really concerned about, and we learned something. You know, they beat that, you can see, they beat that in the ground pretty hard. They beat that in the ground pretty hard, and we told Jesus that that's no much good. He understands that real well. No much good, Jesus. We have to leave a little more grass. And so then they started leaving a little bit more, but what was really interesting that we learned is you cannot, and this here was real early in the year. This was probably in June, early June, and or maybe even late May, and you can't hurt it in 20 hours. As a matter of fact, what you learn is it really set the Kentucky bluegrass and bromegrass back, because that's what was predominant there. And those are invasive plants for our ecosystem. And we come back and looked at that in June and July, or late June and in July, and the flush that we got of native warm season plants it just made you realize that something like this can actually be a benefit, having them impact the way they did. This is typically what we expect leafy spurge to look like when we leave one paddock and move to the next. Those of us that know how to identify plants would struggle, except if you could break the stem and see that there's a milky substance. And so this is typically what it will look like following having the sheep in the paddock. So this is what the leafy spurge looks like. You know, we a lot of times have to use twice over. And so in this particular case, we're getting ready to move back on, and this is like candy to a sheep. It's not tall, it's not coarse, it's green and vegetative, and I took that this year, and it's a drought year. Well, when you have a taproot like leafy spurge does, yeah, maybe it isn't quite as productive, but it's a lot more productive than grass is. So it's one of the reasons why we're still able to maintain our sheep numbers this year, is because the deep-rooted perennials that we have weren't impacted by it. And so they come back, and we move them on to the paddock so we don't worry about them overgrazing the grass, because the grass is dormant. And what is green? The plants that we're trying to target. They will never consume wormwood sage as good as they do leafy spurge or western snowberry. The thistles, we might have to leave them in there twice as long for them to go after the thistles. They don't like thistles. The spines apparently are an issue. This is what it looked like, though. You know, this year you can see what you see in there that's green is the western snowberry, and the brown, of course, is the grass. So not much grass, green grass in our ranch this year at the time that this picture was taken. So as far as our ranch is concerned, what are the economics of it? Ours is a little bit different in that we charge. We get paid to house the Peruvian shepherds. We get paid to graze the sheep and provide management. We tell them where they need to go, and we buy the materials, the polywire, the facilities are all ours, but our facilities are pretty good. I'm not going to say they're as good as maybe theirs are back at the ranch, but the sheep really work and flow well through our ranch. And so the economics of it is it's another source of income, another enterprise for us. We've moved perennial plants that were costing us time and money to control. How are we doing for time? Time and money to control. We moved them from being a liability on our ranch to being an asset. Biodiversity. Just about everybody that has grazing plants has got forbs and has got grasses. And what you're going to find is that not everything eats a forb. Most animals, most ruminants eat grass, but not everything eats a forb. So what eats the forb? Well, in our ecosystem, naturally, the deer do. And that's one of the reasons why we have these forbs spreading. Birds will consume the seeds, but we have a lot of deer, mule deer in particular, that like leafy spurge, and they've been moving it pretty extensively in our part of the world. So we felt we needed to bring an animal in that helps us balance the consumption of the plants that are growing on our ranch, and the sheep is the animal that has been working for us. Chemicals, you know, we have on occasion sprayed a larger area. For sure we spot spray, but we've got neighbors that have sprayed everything, you know, quarter sections of lands, whole sections of land, trying to control noxious weeds. Well, the problem is when you do that, you take out all the beneficial forbs too. So, you know, you've got to look at things holistically, and we've always struggled with that broad base or broad application of chemicals. And then the other thing that the sheep have allowed us to do is get in front of others and talk to them about conservation, and talk to them about what we're doing on our ranch, and give them the opportunity to see that there is another way to do things. And we'd like to think that so far we've made a positive impact, or at least we give the neighbors something to talk about. So our goal on our ranch is to convert solar energy into products for human consumption profitably while making a positive impact on our ecosystem. Questions?
Any questions? Why the 2-acre side from trees would happen if you left them on bigger areas, or the whole would they just cherry pick or kind of pick certain spots to eat to the ground, or what do you doing?
No, for us it's short duration, high intensity grazing. We don't want to put them on 30 acres and just let them pick around. They have to move into water every day anyway. We've got enough polywire, we could easily fence that much, but we want them on for a short time and then off. And the other reason, I don't know. I'm just saying that's just the direction we go. It's about a labor thing too. We want to keep them busy. If they fence 30 acres with polywire, they wouldn't have anything to do for 4 or 5 days. But if we know they're going to be gone, or the next day we're going to work cattle, yeah, we'll make a little bigger paddock. Yeah, sure.
Is it just is there no trees at all, or do you guys already manage them, or do you cut them as they come, or is that what your world's like out there?
What's that? And know what?
Trees?
Trees?
You gotta get out of Minnesota more.
I do.
Yeah.
Let me go over it, I'm like, wow.
We've got. I can show you. Yeah, there's our forest right there.
That picture has been planted by hand.
Yeah. If there's a tree there, it's because we planted it. That's what these are. These are some that we planted. They're native trees. We found a wetter spot to plant them. Yeah.
Any other questions?
We can use trees for landmarks. Like go east of town until you get to the tree on the north side of the road, and then go south.
And that's a cottonwood.
And it is. And the funny thing about it is we had somebody from Minnesota come and say, well, which tree do we turn at? Well, there's only one.
So does letting the animals eat the spurge help with the parasite problem?
Do the animals that eat the spurge help with the parasite problem? You mean it's in terms of the internal parasites? Lisa, can you answer that?
No, I don't think, in this setting, those sheep wouldn't have a parasite load at all.
I believe that to be true, because part of it is, you know, if they defecate, they're gone. The sheep are gone the next day, or even less than that. And I think the rotational grazing probably helps with that.
They worm them though, don't they?
They come and they worm them. Yeah. Yes, sir.
And then why preg check? I'm just curious.
Why are they preg checked? Okay, so they lamb 1,000 head a month. We get 2,000 head. And the reason they use a haired sheep, because they'll breed out of season. So they're half-blood droper meat breed of some type, and then they breed them back to meat buck like Merino or Suffolk. And those,
Like a Sam or a Suffolk, yeah.
right. And so what they'll do then is they will come at the end of probably about in September, and they'll ultrasound test them And the ones that are pregnant need to be home by the 1st of October because they don't want to lamb them at our place. So they've been getting, the 3 years they've been there, they've been getting probably conception, I'm going to say probably about close to 80%, between 75 and 80%. And then they'll test them, and then they'll come back 3 days later, and they'll take the bread, or 3 weeks later, take the breads home and leave the opens and throw them in with the ones that they're still exposing. Yeah.
Okay, let's give Lyle a hand.